how did we go from fighting a revolution over a 2% tax on a breakfast beverage to what we pay today? And we're taxed on money when we receive it, when we spend it, when we keep it, when we invest it, and even when we die with it. It gets worse. We commute to work to make that money in a car that is taxed again to register on roads we're already taxed to build, fueled by gas that is taxed even further, and many times through tolls that tax you again. And that's to maintain bridges and highways and tunnels that already have billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, allocated to them, and they're still falling apart. And then when you get to your office that is taxed to exist, in a corporation that is also taxed to do business, that almost certainly requires permits and other things, which are another tax, you are paid a paycheck that the corporation must match another payroll tax on top of what they have to pay you. Then you go to a home of which you are taxed to own every single year that we bought with money that the government already taxed us on. Oh, by the way, the more money you make and the more you pay in taxes warrants the government taking more and even higher percentages of your money. Now, if you're angry, hold that thought. Our federal tax code is 2,600 pages, 400 pages longer than the unabridged version of the Webster Dictionary. But if you read that tax law cover to cover and you did your taxes solely based on that, you'd probably go to jail. Why? Because that does not include the over 9,000 pages of additional IRS regulations that were never passed into law, but rather written by some bureaucrat sitting in his office that we still have to abide by. Congress never passed that. But hold up. Because if you somehow misinterpret, forget about, or miss just one aspect of any of those nearly 5 million words in those documents, you might need to defend yourself in an audit. Your lawyer, your accountant, maybe even you, might have to review an additional 70,000 pages of tax law and precedent pertaining to any other part of the words that you may have honestly just missed. Oh, by the way, this doesn't even include state and municipal taxes either. What's even crazier, the IRS has the authority to claim you did something wrong, audit you, internally adjudicate your defense that you don't get to be present for, and can unilaterally decide to reach into your bank account and take your money, or put liens on your home or your business without even going in front of a judge or getting a warrant. So much for of, by, and for the people. We revolted on a tax on tea 250 years ago. Our founding fathers are rolling in their graves right now. And what's worse, this has been weaponized before, too, against conservatives, of course. Ironically, against the modern Tea Party, the very people who are calling the IRS a scam. But it wasn't always like this. In fact, in 1895, the Supreme Court ruled any federal taxes against its citizens were unconstitutional. So the government did what the government does best. It protected and expanded itself by passing the 16th Amendment. Now, it says, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. Basically, enter the downfall of America. Basically, the government gave us the middle finger and gave themselves the power to basically do whatever they want and force you to comply at gunpoint. I'm about to explain to you why you should never give the government a fraction of an inch, because once the government does something, it never goes away and it only grows. Reagan warned us about this. Now, before the 16th Amendment, before 1913 when it was passed, most government revenues came from trade tariffs or imported goods or something like that. The 16th Amendment changed the calculation of taxes to individuals rather than to the states, because the states paid taxes to the federal government based on population after they levied them against its residents prior to that. In 1913, it all started to go downhill. The federal government levied its first individual taxes on citizens, 7% on people making $500,000 or more, which is the equivalent today to $15 million. 6% on 250K to 500K, 5% on 100 to 250K, 4% on 75 to 100K, 3% on 50 to 75K, 2% on 20 to 50K, and 1% on anything else up to $20,000 a year in 1913 dollars, which today would be the equivalent of $626,000 salary. And nearly every year, they tacked on more and more and more and then more and then a little bit more and then a lot more, with top tax rates over the years hitting sometimes 90% at one time. Imagine today, though, if you only had to pay a 1% federal tax rate on a $626,000 salary. Wouldn't that be nice? You know what someone taking home that paycheck pays today? Well, at least in 2021, 37%. Today, if you made $626,000 right out the gate, $230,620 of your paycheck goes right out the door to Uncle Sam. Probably over to somebody who hates us, too. In other words, you work for free for the federal government from January 1st to the middle of April. You don't make a dime until 4.5 months into the year. Do you feel represented like that? I sure don't. Oh, and after that was after Trump reduced that burden. Again, this does not include state and local taxes. We're not even going to go there today. You pissed yet? I'm super angry. You should be. People back then, though, were more angry about that 1% tax rate than we are about our 37% tax rate today. That is the power of creeping gradualism of government that I'm always warning you guys about. They will always try to get away with more. It's like you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it just jumps right out, but slowly raise the temperature with him in it. He'll just sit there until he boils. Just want to remind you how much the government sucks. But I now that I have your attention, folks, what if we could change all that without a revolution? What if we could repeal the 16th Amendment? I'd be willing to bet with enough pressure and enough people getting loud, we could get 2/3 of the states, of Congress, and all the other required representatives to do it if we had an organized motion and enough noise was made. Well, Carl, the federal government needs money to run. Well, I happen to want to defund the whole thing, but yes, to a certain enough noise was made. Well, Carl, the federal government needs money to run. Well, I happen to want to defund the whole thing, but yes, to a certain degree, the federal government does need some money. They do a couple good things. But someone's already thought about this. Stephen D. Redden, to be more specific. And this guy, he just randomly mailed me this pamphlet the other day. It ended up on my desk. I took it out and read it. I was like, well, hot damn, let's hear it. He has proposed repealing and replacing the 16th Amendment with essentially a consumption tax. I mean, we've heard this before, but this is interesting, where you would keep 100%, or at least from the federal government, 100% of your paycheck, and a small tax would be levied on items you purchase, from a $1 pack of gum to a billionaire's yacht to a private jet, whatever. Epstein's Island. You would pay taxes based on what you spend. The lowest federal tax rate is currently 12%. So many people would instantly, in that tax bracket, get a 12% raise. But this new proposed tax would be less than 12%. That would be like a 6-pack of Red Bull.